Hello again. Thanks for joining. My name is Jennifer Castinson. I'm with Build Exact, and welcome to our 5 pillars of marketing. We're going to get started in just a minute. We're just making sure that people can join and get their audio and video sorted out. All right. Hi, good morning, good afternoon, depending what time zone you're on. My name is Jennifer Castinson. I'm with Build Exact, and welcome you to our presentation today on the 5 pillars of marketing. We know that you guys are dealing with some tough economic and market factors right now. And at Build Exact, we can help you do less administration work and connect with your dealers so that relationship is seamless and you have more flexibility in your day. So if you can't, when you're done with the webinar today, please go to buildexact.com and check it out and do a free demo. But today we're going to focus on the 5 pillars of marketing, and Mindy Lepp, who is the marketing director for LEPPDESIGN, is going to join us to present. LEPPDESIGN is a full service design and marketing firm, and she's going to extend a pretty generous offer to you guys. So stick around and find out what that is and listen to her tips. She's on the speaker circuit for builders. I actually ran into her at a conference last week. So it's definitely information that you want to hear, and we invite your questions so you can submit them via chat or through the Q&A feature at any time, and we'll take them at the end or during the presentation as Mindy is able to. So thanks again for joining us, and enjoy the presentation. Over to you, Mindy.
Thank you so much. So I'm going to share my screen now so we can go ahead and get started. Okay. And just before we kind of dive in here to the presentation, this is an interactive presentation. So feel free, like Jennifer said, to submit your questions throughout the time. I'm also going to be stopping at the end of each section to allow you to ask questions about each part, just so that you don't forget it at the end. So we'll have time in each section to kind of go through that. And there's some parts where I'm going to ask you questions and things like that. So have your chat kind of on the ready for all those interactive portions. So let's go ahead and dive right on in here. There we go. All right. So the first thing we're going to talk about is branding. That's kind of the baseline, if you will, to kind of build everything else on for your marketing. And branding, those kind of it's one of those terms that sort of, it's kind of a mystical marketing term, and not everybody completely really understands what marketing is or what it means. And there's a lot of misconceptions, I think, about branding. And so I'd first like to open it up to all of you to put in the chat what you think of as a brand. What do you think a brand is? Go ahead and submit your answers in the chat. I don't see any answers in there, so we're going to just move along to kind of what I typically hear as some of the answers for brand. Oh, I think I have something in there. Let's check it out. Oh, the chat is disabled. That is why. Are we able to enable the chat? Or maybe if you all, I don't know if there's a workaround, if we want to just use the Q&A function instead of the chat. Could do that as well. All right, well, we'll just move along here. So some of the things that are sort of misconceptions about brands is a lot of people say that it's a logo, and it's not your logo. A lot of people kind of interchange the two, brand and logo, and kind of use them interchangeably, but it's really not. It's a lot more than your logo. It's also not just merely your identity as a company, nor is it just a product. So think kind of like Dove soap. That is their product. That's not their brand. That's their brand is really much more than that. So if we see all these things that a brand is not, so then what is it, right? What is a brand? So a brand, it's a person's gut feeling about a product, service, or organization. So it's not necessarily what you say it is, though there's part of that. You're trying to portray who you are as a brand, but it's more than that. It's sort of like an emotional connection that your audience makes to you as a company. So it's kind of what they say it is. So for instance, you might say, oh, we get great customer service. You post that all over your website, but then we go over to your Google reviews and people aren't saying that you have good customer service. So that's not really your brand then. So you gotta interpret what the audience says you are, and kind of meld that together with what you want to portray as a brand. Okay, and so we're going to move right along here. So why should you brand yourself? Why should you create who you are as a company and as a brand? Well, the reason you do that is because you want to build trust in people's minds so that they'll be able to trust you enough to do business with you. Think about, when you're shopping, let's say for a TV, and you're standing there in Best Buy and you got all these brands that you're looking at, and the one that you have seen and known about the most, you're going to trust that more, and you might be willing to pay more money to that rather than one that you've never heard of. So that's why we want to build trust before that person ever interacts with you to close the deal. And I do see a Q&A here. Oh, sorry about that. Before. All right. So what you can do when you're branding yourself, you can also create what's called a charismatic brand, which is kind of taking it a step further, and it's creating any product or service or organization for which people believe there's no substitute. So for me, I would say a charismatic brand is Q-tips. I feel like there's no substitute for Q-tips. I do not do generic brand cotton swabs. So that to me is a charismatic brand. I'd like to hear from you all. I think the chat is enabled now. Go ahead and drop in the chat what for you is that one charismatic brand where you feel like there's no substitute. I have to use the brand name for that. Got Tide, Band-Aid. Advil. I usually see Kleenex and Dawn dish soap. Yes, so there's definitely a difference between that and the watery no-name brands. I also usually see Disney here, Amazon. A lot of those are kind of those brands that there's really nobody else that you can kind of swap them out for. So that's kind of what you want your goal to be as a company, that you are in your own space so much so that they just can't go anywhere else, right? Oh, we got Netflix too, yes, for sure. Okay, so here, if you've never done this before for your brand, are some basic questions that you can ask yourself to kind of get started and figuring out who you are. So the first thing to ask yourself is, what is your brand personality? Now that is really the same personality traits that you would apply to a person. You can also apply to a brand. You can be an outgoing brand, a boisterous brand, shy. All of those adjectives can be described for your company as well. And so sit down and literally just print off from the internet a list of personality types and then just circle the ones that you feel best represent you as a brand. The second one is to determine what your brand voice is. And your brand voice, it's how you talk on your website. It's how you talk and create your captions on social media. It's how you answer the phone. It's how you talk to people when they come into your office. All of that is your brand voice. And you want your brand voice to always be consistent. Otherwise, you're going to create what's called brand confusion. So for instance, if you have a website, it's very professional, a little bit stiff. And then you go over here on TikTok and you're doing a bunch of silly videos that are very different from how you talk in your website. That's where you can kind of get some confusion going on there. So you want to try to make sure that you have consistency across all platforms. Now, obviously TikTok is built sort of for that, for some silliness and things like that. So you do have to adapt for the platforms, but you still need to keep a consistent brand voice across the way. The next is to figure out what your USP, which is your unique selling proposition, is. And so sit down and think of yourself, compare it comparatively to your competition and say, okay, what is something that I do that they don't do? Or what is something that I feel like we do better as a company? That is your unique selling proposition. So I see a lot of websites in the building industry where it's just like, we do kitchen remodeling, or we do bathroom remodeling, or we build additions, or whatever it is that you do, cabinets, et cetera, and you're just stating what you do or what your product or service is, and you're not saying what makes you better or different. You need to show that on your website and all of your marketing. And so sort of weaved into that is also, what pain points do you solve? So I know there's a lot of pain points in the building industry right now, especially with labor shortages, supply shortages, and inflation, everything like that. It's definitely some pain points, but if you can kind of figure out how you make those a little bit easier, or maybe it's that you're just really good at communicating with your clients and your customers throughout the process that might be painful, make sure they know that. Say, oh, well, we're going to be with you every step of the way. We're going to let you know when this, and we have, full disclosure about everything. Let them know how you're going to try to solve the pain points that they might be afraid of. And then the last one is to think about, how do you make your clients feel? So this is something that you kind of want to go and look at your reviews and see how you make people feel, and then turn that back around and promote that in your marketing. So one of my clients is a home remodeler, and we kept seeing over and over again in the reviews that people were saying they felt like family at the end. And so we said, oh, okay, well, we can turn that back around and we can use that now in our marketing and say, people say we feel like family, or we can put quotes from testimonials about that. Any questions on branding before we move on to the next section? All right, I'm going to move right along to the second one, second pillar, which is your target market. So we first talked about you as a company, and now we're going to talk about who you're going for, your target market. So to use the fishing example, you can either throw a huge wide net out to just sort of the mass public and in your advertising, and you can pull it in and you can sit there and sort through all the bad fish, the ones that you don't want, and chuck them out, and then finally narrow it down to the ones that you want, and waste a bunch of time on that front end and energy. Or you can choose the right rod, the perfect line, the right bait, and stand in just the right spot in the water and reel in the fish that you're really looking for. And so with your marketing, you want to try to narrow your target market as much as possible, so that you're not wasting a lot of time on that front end sifting through leads that really don't match who you're looking for. So when someone asks you who your target market is, don't start a sentence with the word anyone. So One time I was at a networking meeting, and it was one of those where you stand up and you say who you are and what you're looking for that week. And it was a dentist, and they stood up and said, "This week I'm looking for anyone with teeth." We all sort of laughed, and I think it was meant to be funny, but at the same time, that really was it. That's all they said. And so if someone asks you, what do you do? Or who are you looking for? Don't say, well, I'm looking for anyone who needs a kitchen remodel, or I'm looking for anyone who wants to build a custom home. That's not specific enough. You need to narrow it in for your own self, for your own focus, so you can really try to aim for who you're looking for. And then it also helps those around you to help refer to you who you actually want to be as your customer. I'm just going to show you a couple target market samples that we have created for some of our clients. So this first one here, you'll see is age range 30 to 80. I usually like to tighten that up a little bit, but if you have a wider age range, that can be okay as long as you narrow it in some other ways. So this is a custom home builder in Amelia Island in Florida, in the Florida area where I live. So you want to figure out, okay, what's that age range that I'm looking for? What is the income level? Maybe educational level. And then you need to create what is sort of your baseline, like bottom. Like, I don't really want to sell homes above this amount, or I don't want to sell any cabinet or plumbing or whatever it might be project below here. And then for this one, the remodel cost as well. Let's set that baseline. Yeah, you might get some people under that line and you might be okay with that, but you want to set, like, what is your ideal bottom point? And then that way you can go for who you really want instead of widening up and getting a bunch of lower quality leads that maybe you don't really want. Also in the building industry, we do see a lot of times the female is the driving sort of person throughout the process, if it's like a husband and wife situation. So we put that there just so that we gave it a little bit softer touch on the website as far as design goes for this specific company. This is another target market sample, kind of similar to the one before it, but just to give you an idea of some other things that you can look at. This customer right here, or this client of ours, does outdoor kitchens and fireplaces. So this was their target market here. This is also for that same client that does outdoor kitchens and fireplaces. This is what we created called a sample buyer persona. Basically, this is your dream client who you would love to walk in that door. What are their interests? What are their frustrations? What do they like to do? Try to sit down and just scribble down a bunch of things that you think that ideal customer is going to look like. And then that's going to help you in your advertising. So for instance, this one right here, for outdoor kitchens, maybe they like to fish and then go back and cook that fish on their outdoor kitchen. So maybe we advertise in a local fishing magazine. Maybe we actually do. And for golf, we advertise in a little local golf booklet where the scorecards are. Things like that you can really get the wheels turning of how do I reach these people according to what their interests might be. And this is another sample buyer persona for that same client for the female. So this one we thought of things like for fireplaces at Christmas time. She wants to have a place to put the grandkids' stockings, things like that. Be as specific as you want to be to really get those creative juices flowing of where to reach these people. Any questions about target market before we move on to the next section? Okay, I don't see any questions. So we'll move right along to the next pillar, which is direct mail. So in this digital age that we are in, I think it can be tempting to think that direct mail is dead and maybe not as useful as it used to be. And yes, it isn't. If we compare before computers and everything like that, it was a lot more pertinent that you have a direct mail campaign for your business. But I found specifically in the building industry that direct mail can still be a tool, because that ideal age range, you're kind of looking at like 40 to 60-ish, and maybe above that, depending on what your target market is. And people in that age range still like to read their mail. And so this is still, I think, a valid way to reach them. So I would like to hear from you all. This is a little pop quiz. How many days you think the average mail piece sits in someone's home? I'd like to hear your guesses for that. Go ahead and throw that in the chat. All right, let's see. Brian says 1 day. Luke says 3. Jennifer says 4. Says 10. And Casey says 7. So let's see what the actual answer is. You're going to be surprised. I think I was. I was very surprised. There's 17 days actually. So that tells you something about the longevity of your printed piece, that it could be sitting there for 2 weeks plus on somebody's counter, on their end table, or whatever it is that they put their mail until they finally make the decision of what they're going to do with it. So that many, Jennifer says you have to send birthday cards really far in advance. Yeah. So 17 days. So even if they don't read or, specifically look through whatever it is you send them, this just helps with brand. It's called brand awareness, just keeping your name, your company name top of mind. So if you send something to them and they look at it, they see your company name, maybe they throw it in the trash immediately or eventually, but they've seen your name. So it's there and it's continually over and over again. Bed Bath & Beyond, I don't think they do this as much anymore, but I remember there was a time when it seemed like it was once a month I was getting a flyer from Bed Bath & Beyond. And you would think, oh, it's a huge company, they don't need to do that because everybody knows who they are, but they just want to keep top of mind. They want you, with those 20% off coupons, they want to just remind you over and over again, we're here, we're here, we're here. So that's what you want to do. And with the building industry, the buying process is such a long one that you want to make sure that you're in front of them over and over and over again until they're ready, because you don't know at what point your mail is going to get to them. It could be month 1 where they're starting to think, hey, maybe we want to build a custom home, or oh, I really would like to remodel my kitchen or redo my cabinets or whatever it might be. And it's going to be months long process before they reach out to you probably. So you want to just stay in front of them little by little by little until they're ready. All right. Here's some direct mail stat for you. So 42% of direct mail recipients either read or scan the mail they get. So that actually seems a little bit low to me, because I feel like even if you're going to throw it away, you still see it, before you throw it away. No one's going to throw it away really right before actually seeing what it is. But this next one was interesting. So direct mail recipients purchased 28% more items and spent 28% more money than people who didn't get a direct piece of mail. And then 73% say they prefer being contacted by brands via direct mail. So anyhow, there you can read it whenever you want. And then the age group 45 to 54 is kind of that sweet spot where they really like to still look at their mail. And I'll also add too, whenever, I was already kind of saying this a second ago, as far as the longevity of how long you want to do any kind of direct mail, but I always tell people you want to do it for at least 6 months, if not a whole year, before making a decision as to whether it was really worth it for you or not. Because again, you might have, if you just do it one time or even just a couple times and then you stop, then whatever brand awareness that you started might dissipate and they might forget about you. So they say you kind of need to touch them about 7 times before they can start converting into a customer. So if you only do it a couple times, it's like a waste of money, because you never really got to that 7th touch point. So make sure that you try it for at least 6 to 12 months before you really make a decision as to whether it was worth it for you. I'm going to show you now a postcard series that we did for one of our clients, just to give you an idea of something you can do as well. This is a 3-part series for this remodeling company. The first one that they send out is, "Hi, we're Kreiner Remodeling," and it's the owners on the top right there together. So it's, you know, nice smiley, friendly faces. It goes out a couple weeks before a remodeling project starts, and they send it to the neighbors of the house that they're working on. The second one is "Pardon Our Dust." That one goes in the midst of the remodeling project. And then the last one goes out after the project, about a couple weeks or so when it's finished. So to the point of touching them 7 times, you've already done about half. You've already gone halfway there if you do something like this, where it's a 3-part series. And this is another mail piece that we designed for them, which is an EDDM mailer, which is just a fancy way of saying that you can laser target where your mail goes to. So you give your mail piece to the post office in batches of 100, and you can laser target, say, I want to target this exact zip code right here, and they'll be able to deliver them for you. Any questions on the direct mail piece before we move on to the next section? All right, I'll just give another second, and all right, we will move right along. So the next pillar that we're going to talk about is social media. Now, I'm going to give you a couple stats. We're going to do a couple more little pop quizzes to kind of see if social media is worth it for you, but I'm sure you're aware enough to know that social media is blowing up and continues to be an integral part of our lives for most people. So let's start off with a question for you all, and go ahead and put it in the chat. What you think the percentage of US adults is that uses social media? So this will be 18 and above. What is the percentage you think? All right, so let's open up the chat here and see. We've got 75%, 70, 75 again, 85. Brian says 90. All right, so let's go ahead and find out what is the answer. The answer is 72%, which I actually thought was a little low. But if you look here, 81% of 31 to 49-year-olds are on the platform. So it's a pretty good percentage of us, right, that are utilizing social media these days. Next question for you. Again, put your guesses in the chat of how many minutes a day you think the average adult spends on social media. And I'll give you a hint, it's slightly scary. Okay, Luke says 2.5 hours. We've got 90 minutes and 180 minutes. Any other guesses? 4 hours. How, Brian? All right. So let's see what the answer is. It's 145 minutes. Oh, let me see. I think there's one more guess. 1.5 hours as well. So that's a lot of time that we're on there. We don't notice, you know, we're sitting there watching TV or watching the, you know, whatever it is that we're doing to waste time, and we're just scrolling and scrolling, right? So if you're either you don't have any social media presence at all and you're wondering, should I get on there? Or you have social media, but you're kind of not really doing anything with it and wondering if it's a good use of your time, this should help you make the decision. So, you know, 3/4 of us are spending this much time a day. So you want to try to get in their feed somewhere. So that's the goal. We're going to go through some social media tips for you. So the first thing that you want to do is follow other relevant pages as your page. So on Facebook, I will say that this tactic, yes, I still do it for my clients when we're managing their social media pages, but you really don't see a lot of natural followbacks on Facebook from doing this. Whereas on Instagram, I see when I'm doing these first two items here, following relevant pages as the page, and I'm going in and I'm liking and I'm commenting and I'm sharing posts from other pages as my page, I see about a 20% follow back. So I might do the exact same thing on Facebook and get 2 more followers a month. If I do the same thing on Instagram, I've done 100, I maybe get 20 follow backs. So it's a lot easier to grow that following on Instagram. And then focus on interacting with your audience on social media. I think a lot of small business owners, just because they don't have a lot of time, and you just put up stuff when you can and you just kind of like leave it, post it and go. But you really want to make sure that you're interacting with your audience. So if somebody comments on your post, try to respond as quickly as you can. If somebody sends you a direct message, try to respond to that as quickly as you can. Just make sure that you're interacting and you're not just kind of speaking to them and leaving and letting it be. Also, you want to make sure that you're utilizing industry and location specific hashtags if you're posting on Twitter and Instagram. So, what the reason we do that is because people follow specific hashtags, industry or, trends and location and things like that. And so your goal is to try to show up in those feeds of the hashtags that they're following. So on Instagram, you have about 30 hashtags that you can put at the end of your posts. Usually, around 15 is kind of the sweet spot, but just sit there and do, the specific names of your city. Also use nicknames. So I'm here in the Jacksonville, Florida area. There's a lot of nicknames here. They call it Bold City and, Oldest City and Jax, Jax. There's a lot of nicknames that we have. So all of those are hashtags on Instagram that I'm making sure that I'm following so that and whenever I'm posting, that I'm using those hashtags too. So I can show up in those feeds as well. Facebook, the reason I didn't put that here on the list of suggestions for hashtags is because Facebook, you really don't want to use more than 2 hashtags with your posts. There's a study done actually that showed that every time you posted a hashtag after 2 on Facebook, that the engagement actually started to go down. So you obviously don't want that. So it's different than Instagram, whereas Instagram, you put your post here and then you plop a bunch of hashtags at the end. On Facebook, you want to put 1, maximum 2 hashtags in the midst of your post. So rather than saying, this beautiful kitchen remodel turned out great, hashtag kitchen remodel, hashtag home remodel, hashtag whatever, you want to say this hashtag kitchen remodel turned out great. You want to put it in your sentence. So another tip for you, again, if you're a small business owner, you probably don't have a lot of time to be on the fly posting social media. And I think what can happen a lot is you're busy doing all the stuff that you need to do in the day-to-day, and you get to the end of your week or month and you're like, I forgot to post on social media. So I would suggest use some sort of social media planning tool at the end of each month that will schedule all your posts for the following month. That way you don't have to worry about it. It's there, and then you can go in real time and respond to people that are commenting and things like that, and you can go out and follow other pages. But at least you have your posts set for that month and you don't forget about it. There's lots of tools out there like Sprout Social and Hootsuite that can schedule out your posts. A lot of my clients, I just use the native Facebook scheduler. Actually, it's come a long way. It used to not exist at all several years back, and then they made it, and it was very rudimentary, but now it has a lot of nice features. So if you're just on Instagram and Facebook, then using that native Facebook scheduler will work just fine. And the last tip here is to make sure that you tag other people and other companies whenever you're posting something. So I was at a conference last week, and if you're taking a picture of the speaker or something like that, try to tag that person. That pings them, and that encourages them to hopefully repost about you, scratch each other's backs, and that gives you some more exposure that way. So here are some stats for you. It's a lot to digest, so I'm not going to go through every single little one here, but feel free to take a snapshot with your phone, or you can ask for my slides later. But these are showing you sort of the largest age group for each platform. But I always tell people, like, I don't necessarily look at that as a deciding factor as far as whether I should have my clients on the platform. I look at it more of, okay, first, what's my target market? And then what's the percentage of that age range that's on the platforms? And I typically find it's kind of a shoe-in in the building industry. Facebook and Instagram are kind of the two sort of must-haves. And then we go from, after that, we kind of go from there as far as should we do Twitter and should we do TikTok and the other ones. But typically it's Facebook, I would say, and Instagram if you're in the building industry. Any questions about social media before we move along? All right. So this last part is going to be about website SEO basics. And first, in case you are, SEO stands for search engine optimization. So what it is, it's multiple factors that go into how you rank in search engines. And as we know, Google is kind of the main player. So I'll be saying Google, but obviously we know there's Bing and other ones out there, but really Google is the one that you kind of want to aim for whenever you're optimizing your website. So I'm going to give you some tips on things that you can do on your website to try and help you get up higher on those rankings. So there's a lot of things that go into it, and sometimes you can do everything right, and for whatever reason Google just doesn't want to put you on there. So don't get too discouraged, and don't get your hopes up too much, because a lot of people say, oh, well, this company over here guaranteed that I can get in position 1. There's no guarantees about getting in any positions. You just have to follow the rules and try to do the best that you can. And at the end of the day, it's up to Google to decide. But we try to do our best here. So here's some things that you can look at. So let's move. This is kind of our bullet points, but we're going to go through each one here. So the first one is you want to use your ideal keyword and phrase in your page heading. So let me show you an example of what I'm talking about here. So this is one of our clients. This is the one I mentioned earlier that does outdoor kitchens and fireplaces. They also do fire pits. So this page is about fire pits. So as you see right here, this larger text, it says Ormond Beach and Jacksonville fire pits and fire tables. So ideally we want Jacksonville fire pits to come up if someone searches for that, or if they're in the Jacksonville area and they type fire pits, we want them to come up as well. So whenever you have large text on a page, Google interprets that to be like more important, and they see that as okay. That's a hint as far as what this page is about. And then you want to make sure, if you can, try to put your keyword or your key phrase in your URL at the top of that page. So let me show you. I know it's kind of hard to see here, it's very light, but at the top you see their website, constructionsolutionsflorida.com/products/fire pits. So again, fire pits is our goal for when we want someone to search for this page. You also want to try to use your keywords in the first paragraph on the page and in the first sentence if you can. So let's go again to that same page, and you see here I've highlighted the sort of orange color here, fire pit in Jacksonville. So we're trying to hit all the different points there. We have it in the large text on the page, we've got it in the URL at the top, and then we also have it here in the first paragraph and in the first sentence. So before I move on, I do want to make sure that you know that you can also go overboard in using your keyword too many times on a page, and you've got to be careful about that, because Google will ding you for that if you really abuse it. So, like, you know, for instance, on this page, if I was saying, looking for a fire pit in Jacksonville or a fire table, we've got your fire pit just for you. So check out all the fire pits that we have to offer in Jacksonville because we're the best Jacksonville fire pit place around. That is way too many. And I see a lot of websites like that. It's called keyword stuffing. They're trying to stuff it in as many times as they can. You don't want to do that. You want it to be natural, spread out along your article too. Don't condense it all to the top. Make sure it's a naturally, you know, sprinkled in keyword. There's some other things too that you'll want to do with your page. And the first one is to use meta descriptions and meta titles. You might not know what that is, but that's basically in the back end of the code. And you want to try to put your keywords there as well. If you have a WordPress website, there on my last point here, it's called Yoast SEO plugin. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. It's a fantastic tool. Like picture it like an SEO expert sitting right next to you, looking over your shoulder every time you're making a page or a blog post, and they tell you, oh, fix that and fix that. Like it'll say things like, for your fire pit page, you mentioned the word fire pit 9 times, and you really should only say it 8 times. So you want to take one of those away. It's very specific like that. It'll tell you and guide you through to make sure you're not going over or under. It'll also say if you need to do more. It'll say, oops, you forgot to put it in your meta description or title. So it's a wonderful tool. I love that tool. So the next is to link internally to other pages within your website. So, you know, on that fire pit page, maybe when it says fire table, we link to our fire table page as well. So try to kind of scratch your own back, if you will, you know, link to other parts within your website so that you've got more links out there. The other one is to link externally to other relevant websites. Now, I don't always do this when I'm writing pages for clients on their website, but if it makes sense, go ahead and link out, you know, out to another page too. But, you know, when they're on your website, you want them to stay on your website, right? So don't put in too many external links to other places because you want to keep them there as long as you can. The next is to use what's called alt tags for images and put your keyword and phrase there. So basically, the initial goal of doing that is for those who might be visually impaired and they can't see your actual picture. They can maybe have it read to them what that picture is about, or they might be able to read the font but not see the actual picture, you know, something like that. So if you have alt tags, that tells what the picture is about, and that's another place that you can put your keyword in. So for instance, for that fire pit page, we would probably say fire pit Jacksonville as that alternative text there. And then the next is to be cautious about if you're using a free or cheap website builder, because a lot of those put in, I would consider it junk code at the top of your website. And so when Google or other search engines are kind of scanning through your website and looking for what the pages are about, if you have a lot of junk code at the top, they might give up before they get to where you want them to get to. So the website builders have come a long way from what they used to be when I started doing this 10 plus years ago, but still I would be cautious about your website builder. If you're finding you're really not coming up in search engines and you're using one, might be the problem. There's, like I said, a lot of factors that go into it, but that's something to consider. And then we already talked about the Yoast SEO plugin, which is wonderful. So any questions on the website part? I know that's a lot to digest if you don't know anything about a search engine optimization. So if you have any questions at all, no question is a silly question. So feel free to ask and just drop it in the chat if you have any questions about that. Don't see any questions, and we have a few extra minutes here before we get to the closing. So I'm actually going to go to my bonus pillar here, which is remarketing. and retargeting. So it looks like something's in the chat. Make sure I don't miss it. Okay. All right. So remarketing and retargeting. So let's go talk just a few minutes about this. So retargeting is mostly about serving ads to potential customers based on cookies. So I'm sure we've all seen it. Almost every website nowadays has that little pop-up that says, you know, accept cookies when you're on the website. So that's what this is. We'll talk about that in a second. While remarketing is usually based on email. So it's kind of remarketing to them after they've engaged with you in some way. You want to keep marketing to them over and over again, and you don't want to lose them, right? If they have expressed interest. So let's go back just a second, and we're going to talk about retargeting. I call these the creepy ads. So retargeting is, let's say you go to eBay and you're looking for red shoes, and you spend all this time looking for those perfect red shoes, but you don't buy them. And then the next day you're on an app on your phone, or you're maybe on Facebook or somewhere else, and those red shoes keep following you. That's retargeting. So, and something that you can do there, what you do is you put that onto your website that tracks that visitor, and then it can follow them, like I said, creepily across things that they do. And you can go into Google Ads and put those in so that you can follow them across their journey. And that's another way to, a nice way to reach people, like we talked about earlier, because the buying process is so long in the building industry, that if you can kind of follow them around for a while, if they've initially expressed interest in your company, then that's a good thing. So that's something that you can explore as well. Any questions about that part before we get to our closing section here? No? All right, so we'll back up just a little bit and we'll get to our closing bullet points here. So just to kind of recap what we talked about. So the first section about branding, it's not interchangeable with a logo. It's much more than that. It's who you are as a company. It's how you portray yourself. It's how you're interpreted emotionally from your potential customers and your audience. And then your target audience, you want to try to really define that as much as possible, because you're going to have greater success that way. It's going to be a lot less time on the front end sifting through bad leads if you have narrowed in your target market, and then you in your marketing narrow yourself down so that people just naturally, you know, disqualify them, if you will, from even reaching out to you, because they see, oh, well, no, they do this. Okay, that's not me. So I'll move along. The next is, like we said, send direct mail for at least 6 months, if not a year. I would say that rule also applies to really any marketing that you're doing, whether it's digital ads, you know, anything that you're going to do. Try to stick with it for about 6 months to a year before you make that final decision. And then, like we said, make sure that you're interacting on social media and that you don't just kind of spray and pray, post those things and just kind of walk away. Make sure that you're interacting with people and really building a community where people know who you are. And then make sure your website has proper SEO integrated into the pages, because you know, you could have the most beautiful website in the world with the greatest content, but if you don't have it optimized for search engines, nobody's going to find it. Nobody's going to get there. So make sure that you have the proper SEO integrated into your pages. So does anybody have any questions about any of the 5 or 6 pillars that we talked about, or really anything marketing? We can open up now to any other questions that you might have about marketing, even if we didn't cover it.
Mindy, that was an awesome presentation. And actually, I'm going to make sure that we answer any questions that do come in. But I have a question for you real quick.
Yes, go ahead.
So what do you do with negative reviews?
Ooh. So you don't want to ignore them. That's the first thing. Definitely reach out to them. This is honestly, it's an art that I am still trying to figure out what's the best optimal way to do this. But You want to make sure that you recognize the problem and offer some kind of sympathy to whatever it is that they're expressing, even if you might not agree with what it is that they're saying. Try to give some kind of sympathy. Remember, this is not just you responding to that person. You're responding to everybody else that's going to read that review interaction. So keep that in mind. Keep your head cool. I see it a lot, you know, when it stirs up emotions in the business owner, they're like, that is not how it happened. And, you know, don't do that. Keep your cool. So address the problem. Try to see if you can work it out. So I've had this happen multiple times with my clients where somebody will give them a negative Google review. We go on there and we say, we're so sorry this happened. Please reach out to our general manager. We give the specific name of who to reach out to, and then they work it out, and that person goes back and they adjust the review. So a lot of times that will happen. So just make sure, yeah, don't ignore it. Make sure you address it. And if you can, try to put them in touch with the right person at your company that can try to solve that problem, and make sure you ask if they can update the review, because sometimes they might forget, but that's very important that if you can get them to adjust the review for you after you fix it.
Got it. Now that's solid advice. And actually, I just did a camp for one of my kids and gave, I think, 3 out of 5 stars. And literally like hours later, I got a phone call from them and said, what can we do to adjust your thinking about this? And I'll give you a month free of blah, blah, blah. I was just floored. So, and he said, I'll do this, and it will, if you go back in and you do the review, redo the review. So anyway, fantastic information. I don't see any additional questions coming in. Thank you so much, Mindy. What a pleasure to have you.
Sure, thank you. And I did want to mention before I forget, is that I know we kind of referenced it at the beginning of what I offer to anyone who's on the session right now, or anybody who's watching this later as well, is that I offer a complimentary quick marketing review for your website and your social media. So just take a quick look at it and give you any tips that I can that are really customized for you. And then we meet via Zoom for like an hour, and you can ask me any additional questions and, you know, extra from whatever it is that I've already prepared for my tips. There's no sales pitch or anything. It's just me helping you because I enjoy doing it, and because maybe you or somebody you know might need us in the future. So I'm offering that. Anybody who'd like to take me up on that, feel free to just shoot me an email or give me a call, and I'd be more than happy to do that for you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much again, Mindy. And just I don't know if you guys are looking at the chat, but Luke just said, I always view a negative review as a chance to create a raving fan. If you listen and solve, then you can win, which creates a person that is a word of mouth advertisement. If not, usually can pacify them to silence, which is great advice, Luke. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who attended. Please visit buildexact.com, sign up for a demo. And thanks again, Mindy.
Sure. Thank you all.
Have a great day.
Bye.